All aboard! The Michael Penix hype train is leaving the station.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Mr. AKA, and I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for a very long time, formerly at FalcFans.com. RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that go strong with me as every dayers. That means you make it your first listen each and every day. And if you come in every day, all you got to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And guys, today we are joined by none other than the Falcoholic himself, the head honcho, Dave Choate. And it's a great time to have Dave on because it's the beginning of a brand new era of Atlanta Falcons football. And as I sit here and I say, hey, I've been covering the Falcons for a very long time, so has Dave. Pretty much the same amount of time that I have been covering, multiple decades at this point in time. So, he's the perfect person to bring on, to give us that much needed perspective when it comes to what we saw from Michael Penix on Sunday against New York Giants. We'll, of course, talk about the defense. We'll look ahead to this big matchup on Sunday Night Football that could decide the Falcons' entire season against the Washington Commanders. But first, Dave, I have to ask you the question. Are the Falcons back? Are we back?
I think we're back. Yeah, I think we're back for 1 week at least.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll take it. I'll take it. It's one more week than I've had the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it feels like. So I'll take it.
Me too. It's I was going to say we have been through a lot of eras of Falcons football, and not all of them have started off this well. So we can take that.
Well, Dave, I want to talk about Michael Penix and his debut. I was tempering my expectations all week long. Like, I didn't think he was going to come out here and be a disaster, but I thought we would get sort of the typical rookie struggles. We didn't really get those typical rookie struggles, even if it didn't always necessarily manifest itself with this offense being, electric or anything like that. I kind of went into this game thinking it was going to be like a 20-17 type of game. And without the two defensive scores, you can argue it was kind of like that with the offense putting up 20 points in this one. But I'm curious from your perspective, what were sort of your expectations going into this game? Were you trying to keep it low, or were you drinking the Kool-Aid when it came to Michael Penix?
I think I was drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but it's also because I had been drinking the Cousins Aid, and that was pretty nasty. So my expectations were heightened, understanding that, what he brought to the table was going to be more interesting and probably effective than this version of Kirk Cousins. So I did expect a good day. To say that I expected what we got, which was a really crisp, veteran-looking performance. No, my expectations were not that high. So, nice surprise.
Yeah. So, Dave, I have to ask you this question. You got to dig back deep into, your memory banks to go all the way back, 16 years to when Matt Ryan began his time here in Atlanta. But did you get similar vibes? Am I being too hasty to make those comparisons off of that first game?
No, I don't think so, because I think the thing to remember about Matt Ryan coming into it was a healthy mix of people being excited and people, including me, being very skeptical about, can he be the savior we need? The Falcons were in a rough place. They badly needed that level of quarterback play. And then what you got out of Matt Ryan right away was really much better than expected. It was clear that he was going to be a good quarterback at minimum, I think, right from the start. So you get a very similar vibe from Penix, where he looked, very different circumstances, but I think he looked like he's going to be a good quarterback at minimum right out of the gate. And I think the sort of electric effect that has on this fan base, even if the offense itself, to your point, wasn't electric, you can't understate that.
Yeah, and I know some people are going to be like, "Oh, God, it's the Giants. They're the worst team in the league." But people don't remember Matt Ryan's first game came against the what would become the 0-16 Detroit Lions. So not just the worst team in the league, one of the worst teams to ever play professional football. I think Dave, your point of that again, looking like a professional is really what sort of stands out to me. That he looked like a player that just didn't have 2 practices with the starters or had 22 dropbacks going into this game. He looked like, a veteran. And again, you can certainly say, hey, well, it was against a bad team. Sure. But it is to me, there is a lot of parallels between Matt Ryan's start as well as Michael Penix's start. And, that's what this fan base has desperately wanted for the last 3 years, of having somebody that you can say, I think this is the guy that can take us into the next era. And again, we'll see how it ages over the next couple of weeks and then the next season or so. And so it's not guaranteed success, but this is as good a start as I think you could want and hope for this team. Is that fair to say?
I think that's absolutely fair to say. And I think, what feels sustainable about it, and again, we'll see if this all comes apart in a week or so, is the things that he was doing. Yes, it was against a bad team, but he was following a process. He was reading the field well. He was making sharp throws. He was evading pressure, including rolling a guy off his back, which was pretty impressive. Like these are things that should anyways translate long term too. So it's hard to see it as a flash in the pan, and it's very easy to see it as going from a 36-year-old quarterback who had fallen short of expectations to your highly touted, highly drafted rookie. It's hard not to get invested in that. I'm not that jaded yet. I just can't get there.
Yeah. We'll continue today's episode talking about the Falcons defense and their performance and their sort of domination of a quote unquote bad Giants offense, because they absolutely deserve a lot of the love for this team sort of kind of looking like the team that we've been wanting them to look like. And we'll get into all of that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons here with Dave Choate of the Falcoholic. Now, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And FanDuel has so many ways that you can pick up that much needed win, whether it's betting on, the spread as it is, with the Falcons being 4.5-point underdogs against the Washington Commanders later this week in week 17. But you can also bet on who's the first player to score a touchdown, what type of touchdown that will be. If you had, a Jesse Bates pick 6 over at FanDuel, you probably got a little bit of money. But so many different things that you can bet on over at FanDuel. And then not just the NFL, of course, the NBA, college football playoffs, all that is available at FanDuel.com. So head over there and join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Dave, let's talk about this Falcons defense and how they played, right? You can certainly say, well, again, it's the Giants. They're the worst offense in the NFL, but the Falcons defense made them look like the worst offense in the NFL. And as I said, I feel like that's what we've been wanting from this defense, to play up to their, play up to their, the words, not play down to their competition is what I'm trying to say. And I think we got that on Sunday. Is that fair?
I think it's very fair. I think you look at, 3 out of the last 4 weeks too. I know that things went wildly off the rails in Minnesota based on a few busted plays, really, if we're looking at that. But against the Chargers, against the bad Raiders team, now against the Giants, they've sort of done what we want them to do. They are rushing the passer effectively. The secondary looks improved. I think, again, aside from that Minnesota game, I'm hand-waving that away a little bit. And the run defense has been pretty good for longer than that, close to 6 or 7 weeks now. So I think that this is the defense sort of gelling into as good as it's likely to get. I think the Washington game is going to be tough and a good test, but this is sort of the best version of the defense I think we thought we'd get this year, which is getting better at limiting the big plays, shutting down these inferior offenses, these banged up offenses that they're facing, and actually getting sacks. I eagerly looked this morning to see if they were out of 32nd in sacks. They aren't yet, but they are within striking distance of it. And they were behind by like 13 a month ago. So that's not bad.
Yeah, I think so. I remember joking on this podcast a couple of weeks ago about there's a chance that they might get to 20 sacks. Now there's a chance that they might get to 30 sacks at this point in the season. So, things are looking up for this defense. And I'm just curious from your perspective, Dave, is this kind of what, and I know, as you mentioned, how they perform against Washington this week, I think will go a long way to factoring this in. And then it subsequently against Carolina, because, the most Falcon thing that you can do is win this Washington game and then lose to Carolina. That being said, if this continues, if this trend continues that we've seen over these last couple of weeks, as you mentioned, is this realistic to expect a similar sort of performance from this defense for the entirety of the 2025 season?
I think it is. I think the tough part is, we know there's going to be some attrition. Older players in particular. I don't know that they'll keep both Jarrett and Onyemata. I don't know if they'll be able to keep Mike Hughes around or not. So there are things that could indicate some pullback. But I do think it's fair to expect with some continuity and with some of the growth that we have seen from players like Arnold Ebiketie, from some of the young guys. I thought Rook had a good game against the Giants. That this is a level of play with a little bit up and down as we'd expect that they can sustain. I do think this is closer to the true talent level of this defense than what we were seeing, a few weeks back against Denver, which was sort of the low water mark, I think, of the season for me. So I think it's realistic to expect something like this. Apparently I'm going to be all positive today. That's what you get.
Hey, Dave, look, you've made many appearances on this podcast over the last decade. Okay. And I don't know how many times you've had a chance to be all positive. So, if anybody comes for you for being too positive about the Atlanta Falcons, you just say, look, this is the Atlanta Falcons we're talking about. So,
yeah, I'll take it when I can get it. Yeah,
pretty much. Beggars cannot be choosers. I'm curious when you talk about, some of these young players and sort of, we've seen sort of this big growth from Arnold Ebiketie. We've seen, Caden Ellis really sort of make his name these last couple of weeks. I think today is the final day for Pro Bowl voting. Sort of me personally, there were like 5 Falcons that to me, I could probably make a compelling case to be Pro Bowlers. I think Jesse Bates is one, Bijan Robinson is another, Chris Lindstrom is another. And I think Caden Ellis is that 4th guy, and then maybe Kadero Hodge on special teams would probably be the 5 that I would feel like would be most deserving on this team for Pro Bowl bid. But I'm curious, when you look at this defense, you look at Caden Ellis, as well as some of these young guys like Arnold Ebiketie and others, and Rook, who sort of is sort of standing out to you, especially with this sort of recent turnaround?
Ellis is definitely up there. I think one of the most important things the Falcons can do in 2025 is either hopefully get Troy Anderson healthy or get an effective complement to him so that you can unleash him on a weekly basis the way he has been unleashed as a pass rusher. It's been huge the way he's come on over the back half of the season, I think, for the whole defense. And I also think, it's been such an up and down campaign for D. Alford, but I have seen over the last few weeks in between some of the lapses, some encouraging things from him as well, where maybe he's getting his feet under him and can hold down the nickel long term, because to me, him being young and affordable and a physical player, and the Falcons seemingly lacking a lot of options to play inside, I don't think that Mike Hughes or Clark Phillips is really the answer there long term. It would be great if he could kind of build on that. And then I still, even though we haven't seen him at all this year, I still have high hopes for DeMarco Helms being able to step in and be that really quality third safety that the Falcons were missing this year, and maybe a starter if they don't bring back Justin Simmons, which is a possibility. I think it's a little bit more muddled up front between the injuries you've had and the fact that the rookies haven't played a lot, but I do have high hopes for Rook and Dorless too.
Yeah, I'm expecting expanded roles for Rook and Harrison, especially.
Harrison, yeah, jeez,
yeah. To take over kind of starting roles next year. With, I think, my sort of expectation that you probably will move on from David Onyemata. I think Grady will be back, but he'll probably be on a much more reduced role than what we have grown accustomed to seeing him these last couple of years. And so I feel like both Rook and Harrison in their, they haven't gotten the snaps that I think a lot of people want them to get, but I think when they've been on the field, they've been sort of more effective in those roles that they're being asked to play than either Onyemata and Grady have been, especially as run defenders. And sort of, we'll see what develops for those guys in terms of whether or not they can be consistent pass rushers. Like, I think you've seen flashes from both, probably more from Harrison at this stage than Rook. But, is it going to be like, are you going to get like 1 or 2 good reps a game, or is it, can you get them to the point where it's like 3 or 4 or 5, pressures and then, turning one of those into a sack or something like that. And that's what I'm hoping for next year. But I think those are all things to make me feel better about this young group, even if I don't think the defense as a whole is completely finished. I still think there's still several pieces that they need to add at all 3 levels of the defense. But I certainly think, this young group of players has flashed enough to make me feel like, okay, I think, if they can continue developing those guys, they're in good hands.
Yeah. And I can't believe I forgot Harrison. Shameful.
So, I guess we're going to talk a little bit more about this upcoming game and some of the challenges that the Falcons are going to face in this game. But I'm just curious, are you sort of expecting this defense to continue its level of play next week against Washington?
I am. I think what I fear is that we're going to have a similar game to Minnesota, where maybe the level of play throughout the game is actually pretty good, but the opponent is difficult and some of the big play potential is there, where the Falcons have in recent weeks fallen down a handful of times. So I think they'll put up a pretty game effort. I think they'll certainly look a little bit better maybe than the Eagles just did. Which is weird to say because the Eagles, of course, have the talent to be a much better defense. But I do worry about those big plays. I do. And I worry about it a little bit against Carolina, the way they've looked in recent weeks too. So,
yes. I know it's easy for folks to sit here and be like, oh, of course they're going to beat the Carolina Panthers. And I'm just like, I don't know. Dave, I know you've been around for a long time, but that's not usually how it goes for the Atlanta Falcons. But we will see. Again, it's a brand new era. It is a brand new era. But, I think all eyes are on this Week 17 Sunday night matchup against Washington. And basically, what I want to talk with Dave here to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons is, does the Falcons season kind of boil down to this next game? And we'll get into all of that as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks, and if you love watching the game, you're going to love PrizePicks because it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks is making your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. In this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks this December. And you can do the way that PrizePicks is so fast and easy is because you just pick more or less on their stat projections. Just look at at least two stat projections and just pick more or less on them, whether it's receiving yards, touchdowns, or in, Kirk Cousins' case, more on the interceptions, Michael Penix's case, less on those interceptions, whatever it is. It's that easy. All you got to do is download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. And you'll get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you just play $5. PrizePicks, run your game. And Locked On has been very good to me these last couple of years. And gotten a little bit more money in my pocket, and I want to be smarter with my money, and I don't want to be frivolous with my spending. And that's why I have Rocket Money to help me monitor my spending. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that is going to help you monitor your spending. It's going to help lower your bills so that you can grow your savings, and it's going to help you cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's those subscriptions, spending habits, or even your goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. And canceling subscriptions is the big selling point for Rocket Money, and you find out pretty quickly when you sign up how much your money you're wasting. $5 here, $8 here, $12, $20 here, and all that. And that's how you can quickly add up to $740 a year. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So Dave, Falcons have a big Sunday night matchup between Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix. You know, it's going to be lots of hype, lots of talk. We're not getting the Kirk Cousins, returns to Washington narrative. You know, this is kind of it, right? This is going to decide the season. Is that fair to say?
I think it probably will. I'm not willing to rule out Carolina beating a Tampa Bay team that has been skating by almost every week, just barely doing it right up until they lost to the Cowboys. But I do think from a season perspective, and then from a, hey, can you actually win any games in the postseason if you make it their perspective, this is the big game for sure. Dan Quinn back in town, even more importantly, Lamade Zaccheaus back in town. This is a big deal. So
Marcus Mariota, no love.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, just going through my head on former Falcons that are in Washington. I'm sure there's a couple more that we're blanking on. But the Dan Quinn of it all, the Raheem protege, all that sort of stuff. It's a lot of storylines for this game, and part of me, 24 hours ago would have been like, okay, let's calm down, guys. It's Michael Penix's second start. He's going to be a playoff. This is basically a playoff sort of game. And I've been like, don't get your hopes up too high. And maybe later this week, I might get disappointed with some Christmas gifts or something, and it will cause me to get into a mood or something, and I'll get back to sort of tempering my expectations. But at least today, again, I don't know how it's going to be, 24 hours from now, 48 hours from now. But at least today, I feel like there is a real shot that like we could get more out of Michael Penix in this game than I think anybody outside of maybe his grandmother, because everybody knows your grandmother is your biggest supporter, or at least hopefully your grandmother is your biggest supporter. Hopefully you had that type of grandma rather than the other type of grandma. But sorry for going on tangent. Some people's grandmas are their biggest haters.
It's true.
But given I lost my complete train of thought. Given that Michael Penix, what he did on Sunday, I think there's reasonable expectations that like they got a shot, right? Because obviously Jaden Daniels has a lot more experience at this point in time, and it's probably at a further level of his development, 14, 15 games in than Michael Penix is going into game 2. But it's still, at the end of the day, he is still a rookie quarterback. And this Washington offense has been a lot more up and down over the last month or so than it was at the beginning of the season when they seemed to be kind of this unstoppable juggernaut. One of the things I've talked about on Locked On Falcons is similar to the Falcons, Washington really hasn't beaten anybody. Like Philadelphia was their biggest signature win. Atlanta's one signature win against a quality opponent this year is also against Philadelphia. So, that says something. And this is likely whoever wins the 7 seed will wind up playing Philadelphia in the playoffs. So that is something to keep an eye on. But I say that just because it does feel like this is this team's opportunity to really have a kind of a breakthrough performance on national television. And it's a wild thing to say. I'm going to stop talking in a second, Dave, but it's a wild thing to say because anytime this team is on national television, I'm like, just don't embarrass me. And now I'm actually feeling optimistic, and it's just a weird place to be at this point.
It's a really weird place to be. I feel the same way. It's Washington kind of took that. They're a much better team, but they took that 2015 Falcons trajectory under Dan Quinn a little literally, where they looked unstoppable for the first third of the season, and things have been uneven since then. So I think as much talent as they have, and I'm having nightmares of Terry McLaurin, scoring a couple touchdowns over the top, as he is wont to do. It feels like a game the Falcons should be competitive in. If they win it, it's, to your point, who knows what happens in Carolina? The Falcons have let us down in many, many ways, but I have a fairly good feeling about this, and I don't know what to do with that. It is in many ways the season and the chance for Michael Penix to get that signature win right now. So
yes. In my brain, I just harken back to Desmond Ridder beating Tom Brady, and we rode that for several months. We did. I'd like to have another one of those moments where Michael Penix proves to himself to be QB1 by beating potential offensive rookie of the year Jaden Daniels at this stage in the season, and we will absolutely ride that for several months until eventually the wheels fall off or whatever. But it's a good week. Again, it was a rough sort of meandering path to get here, but at least we have this week. I don't know if next week is going to be feeling the same way, but at least we have this week. But my last question for you, David, looking ahead to that matchup, is it Terry McLaurin? Is it Jaden Daniels' mobility? Is there one specific matchup in that game that you're circling as the one that folks need to keep their eyes on the most this week?
Yeah, it is McLaurin, and against Terrell, it's a challenging matchup to begin with. I'm sort of terrified of what happens if he's matched up against others. I do have nightmares of Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison dancing in my head instead of Sugar Plum Fairies at this point, but that's the one to me. I think Daniels is dangerous. That mobility does matter. Certainly, I think Washington can be disruptive to Penix in a way that we'll have to see how that goes. But I worry a lot about McLaurin because I think he's an excellent receiver who is enjoying a breakout season now that he finally has competent quarterback play, and he's sort of that big play, deep threat that the Falcons have had their struggles with this year. So to me, if you can keep McLaurin in check, you probably have a good chance of winning this game outright.
I think that's a great way of putting it, right? We had troubles keeping him in check when Taylor Heineke was throwing him the football. Now Jaden Daniels is throwing him the football, so that's a bigger challenge. So we will see what's what with the Falcons on that. Any parting shots, Dave, that you want to comment on, from this Giants game or this upcoming Commanders game before we can duck out of here?
No, just again, let's try to soak this in, we can. Maybe the Penix thing turns out to be the next coming of Matt Ryan. We have our franchise quarterback, and there's a lot of good times ahead. But also, let's take every lopsided beatdown, regardless of opponent. That's a fun, positive game with good vibes and very little negative, and enjoy it because nothing lasts forever, and everything with the Falcons lasts half as long as that.
There you go. So that is it, guys, for today's episode. Dave, I'll give you the floor to plug whatever you want to plug over at the Falcaholic and elsewhere this week.
Yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff coming. I know Alan Stirk's going to have a great game preview for the game ahead. I believe he's attending for us, so he'll have live coverage of that. We'll be diving into the matchup a lot, including McLaurin and Daniels. And, of course, we will have our sacred duty of naming 5 Falcons on Sunday, courtesy of Aaron Freeman. So be sure to check that out.
There you go. So that is it, guys. Of course, you can find all that great content over at the Falcaholic, the SB Nation website for the Atlanta Falcons. And, continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And continue to check out all the great content over at the Locked On NFL show to get you geared up for what the other 31 NFL teams are doing. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.